The first transmission arrived at 3:14 Universal Time, cutting through Earth's fragile network of communications like a scalpel slicing through tissue. It wasn't accompanied by fanfare, warnings, or diplomacy. It was a declaration, absolute and unambiguous. The Great Galactic Council, representing a coalition of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, had delivered its ultimatum: surrender or face total annihilation. The Council's message was clinical, almost casual in its phrasing. Earth was to submit its fleets, transfer sovereignty to the Council, and pledge immediate allegiance. 48 hours were allotted. After that, the Council promised, there would be no negotiation, no mercy, no quarter. On Earth, the news spread in a wave of disbelief that rippled from military command centers to government offices to civilian populations. Analysts scrambled to decode the Council's communications, but even the most sophisticated AI translators struggled with the layers of implication, double meanings, and subtle condescension embedded within the message. It was clear the Council did not see humans as an equal, or even as a species worthy of consideration. They were an annoyance, a minor species with a primitive fleet and an isolated planet whose existence was barely worth monitoring until now. The Council's reports had been blunt. Earth's fleets were laughably small by galactic standards. The defensive satellites orbiting the planet were outdated. Human technology, while clever, could not possibly match the Council's energy weapons, warp drives, or autonomous drones. Their assessment concluded with chilling finality: humanity would submit or be eradicated. Most species assumed that the humans would comply out of fear, pragmatism, or simple survival instinct. Admiral Selkirk, veteran of decades in Earth's Defense Command and now Supreme Commander of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet, convened an emergency council meeting aboard the orbital citadel over New Geneva. The station, a massive hub of human command, stretched kilometers above the planet's surface, a combination of orbital engineering, defensive arrays, and communication hubs. Inside, tension coiled like a living thing. Military strategists, political leaders, scientists, and diplomats filled the chamber, every face reflecting a mixture of disbelief, apprehension, and that singular spark of something deeper defiance. Selkirk did not raise his voice. He did not panic. Instead, he walked to the center of the council chamber, his eyes sweeping over the gathered leaders. "They've underestimated us," he said. His words were calm, deliberate, carrying the weight of authority and conviction. "They assume we will comply. They assume we will beg. They are about to discover the cost of their arrogance. Humanity will not bow. Humanity will not yield." A murmur rippled through the room, a mixture of relief and awe. Some of the younger officers had never seen anyone speak with such certainty in the face of overwhelming odds. Even the seasoned diplomats, trained to negotiate with species whose very existence made human intelligence pale by comparison, found themselves silent, captivated by the Admiral's certainty. Earth's response was immediate and total. Within hours, shipyards across the planet, previously focused on exploration vessels, research ships, and logistical craft, were repurposed for war production. Frigates, cruisers, and stealth vessels rolled off assembly lines at a pace that defied logistics and imagination. Engineers, designers, and scientists worked day and night, fueled by adrenaline, determination, and something uniquely human, a refusal to be told impossible. The collective genius of humanity, usually scattered across countless private projects, corporate research labs, and university programs, was redirected toward a singular planet-wide goal: defense, survival, and preparation to confront an enemy that had deemed them irrelevant. The science councils, composed of experts in propulsion, energy weaponry, and shield technology, collaborated in ways that no bureaucracy had ever permitted. Conventional laws of physics were tested, reinterpreted, and adapted. They enhanced warp drives with improvisations never attempted in peacetime. They tuned energy weapons for maximum destructive efficiency without sacrificing accuracy. Shields, previously designed for atmospheric anomalies and solar flares, were upgraded to withstand concentrated plasma and particle bombardment from interstellar weapons systems. Every advancement, every modification, and every improvisation carried the same message: humans would not be easily defeated. Even civilians were mobilized. From the Arctic research stations to equatorial megacities, engineers, logistics experts, and volunteers worked tirelessly to supply the fleet, fortify the planet, and create redundancies in critical systems. The planetary infrastructure itself, power grids, communications, arrays, orbital defenses, was transformed into a seamless network capable of adapting to unprecedented threats. Children who had grown up playing virtual simulations of space combat now found themselves assisting engineers in coding adaptive AI modules. Ordinary citizens, armed with knowledge and determination, became indispensable participants in the planet's survival. Meanwhile, the Council's emissaries, monitoring humanity's preparations in real time through observation satellites and sensor arrays, began to register anomalies. Ship production, they noted, exceeded expected output. Strategic deployment patterns demonstrated a level of coordination they had not anticipated. Human engineers were improvising solutions that rendered certain surveillance techniques ineffective. For the first time, the Council's assessments contained uncertainty, a flicker of doubt. By the time the first enemy vessels arrived at the outer edge of the Sol system, Earth was ready. The Terran fleet, though smaller in number, was optimized for versatility, stealth, and adaptability. Cloaked corvettes darted between asteroid fields, deploying sensor jammers and creating illusions of additional fleets. Orbital defense platforms, long considered obsolete by the Council's calculations, were re-engineered to deliver precise, high-intensity volleys capable of crippling enemy vessels. Every move, every system, every strategy was designed to exploit the Council's assumptions about humanity, that they were predictable, rigid, and incapable of operating under extreme pressure. When the first skirmishes began, the aliens laughed. They assumed these small vessels would be easily destroyed, that humanity's ingenuity was nothing more than desperate improvisation doomed to fail. But the humans had learned to turn desperation into strength. Their unpredictability became a weapon. Their resourcefulness, honed over millennia of surviving in an unforgiving solar system, became a force multiplier. The Council would soon learn that intelligence, courage, and adaptability could outmatch size, technology, and centuries of assumed superiority. From the orbital citadel, Admiral Selkirk observed the first glimmers of battle. His expression remained calm, even as reports streamed in of enemy systems malfunctioning, entire squadrons immobilized by human improvisation, and formations breaking under pressure. He knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would be paid for in full. As Earth braced for the coming conflict, the truth became clear. The humans of this small blue planet were about to demonstrate a principle that every civilization had long ignored. They would not surrender. They would not beg. They would fight, adapt, and endure, and they would show the galaxy why humanity was a force that could never, under any circumstances, be dismissed. And thus, the stage was set. The Council had declared war on Earth. They had assumed victory. They had chosen poorly. The edge of the Sol system had never witnessed such a gathering of power. The alien coalition's vanguard moved with confidence, a show of technological superiority and hubris, their ships stretching miles across the void, bristling with weapons that could vaporize entire fleets in seconds. They were the masters of the galaxy, or so they believed. Their senses, finely tuned to detect and analyze threats, barely registered the human fleet as a meaningful obstacle. Humans, in their calculations, were as inconsequential as a colony of insects under a magnifying glass. Yet, within the human fleet, an entirely different dynamic unfolded. Every ship, every crew member, every adaptive AI was operating in a synchrony born of necessity, experience, and instinct honed over countless generations of survival on a planet where adversity was constant. The humans' fleet was smaller, yes, but it was not lacking in strategy, intelligence, or creativity. Every decision, from the largest dreadnought's trajectory to the smallest drone's micro-adjustments, was executed with a precision the Coalition could not anticipate. Admiral Selkirk, aboard the flagship Dauntless Resolve, observed the alien formations through augmented command lenses that integrated real-time data from every sensor, scout, and satellite under human control. He did not merely watch the fleet. He conducted it like a composer leading an orchestra of war. The humans were fluid and unpredictable, exploiting gaps in alien sensor sweeps, drawing fire into traps, and striking with surgical precision where the enemy was weakest. Every move was a test of the Coalition's arrogance, and every test revealed the flaws in their assumptions. The first volley of engagement stunned the aliens. Cloaked corvettes darted through asteroid belts and magnetic anomalies, launching drones that interfered with enemy sensors. These small, seemingly insignificant vessels, dismissed in preliminary intelligence as non-combatants, suddenly became hunters in the void. They struck at vital systems, propulsion units, shield emitters, communication arrays. The Coalition scrambled to respond, their massive ships designed for overwhelming force rather than cunning, suddenly vulnerable to a species they had assumed could only flee or perish. Orbital defense platforms, previously written off as relics of a less sophisticated age, transformed into killing zones. They unleashed concentrated volleys of plasma and kinetic projectiles with uncanny accuracy. Shields designed for conventional attacks faltered under the precise timing and adaptive targeting the humans deployed. Alien drones were intercepted and corrupted by hacking signals, injected by human AI turning their own technology against them. Chaos spread through the Coalition's ranks like wildfire, and the first cracks in their morale appeared. Admiral Selkirk's strategy relied not on direct confrontation, but on manipulation of perception and expectation. He sent decoy signals mimicking entire fleets when none existed. He used electronic warfare to generate phantom threats that drew alien fire into empty space. Small attack groups feigned retreats, luring enemy vessels into ambushes where orbital platforms and hidden corvettes could strike with devastating effect. Every engagement was a lesson in adaptability, and every lesson was one the aliens had never prepared for. The Coalition, trained to expect predictable patterns, was bewildered. Their vast experience with other civilizations, their technological superiority, and their rigid doctrines were of no use against a species that did not conform to any expectation. In moments where a traditional military force would panic or stall, humans acted with calm audacity, improvising solutions and exploiting opportunities with relentless efficiency. The alien captains began to understand, too late, that underestimating humanity had been their first and gravest error. On Earth, the war effort extended far beyond the battlefield. Engineers, scientists, and technicians coordinated from orbital stations, planetary command centers, and even mobile laboratories embedded within the fleet itself. Data from sensors, reconnaissance drones, and field AI were analyzed in real time to refine strategy on the fly. Energy grids, propulsion networks, and weapon systems were upgraded mid-combat, transforming ordinary ships into extraordinary instruments of war. Civilians contributed by calculating probability matrices, optimizing supply chains, and even developing contingency AI subroutines for combat drones. The planet itself became a dynamic participant in the fight. Every orbit, every satellite, every sensor network synchronized in service of survival. Amid the chaos, individual stories of human ingenuity emerged. A squadron of scout frigates facing overwhelming numbers executed a maneuver that defied all known tactical doctrine. Using gravitational anomalies around a rogue asteroid cluster, they appeared to vanish from sensors, only to re-emerge behind enemy lines and disable a command vessel with a coordinated series of precision strikes. In another sector, human engineers remotely rewired a failed energy relay on a cruiser, converting it into a makeshift cannon that destroyed an alien drone swarm in a single strike. These were not isolated incidents. They were manifestations of the very essence of human adaptability. The alien coalition, witnessing these events unfold, began to adjust, but too slowly, too cautiously. Their attempts to counter human unpredictability often led to greater errors, as larger vessels, dependent on rigid formations and central commands, became easy targets for the smaller, nimbler human ships. Entire squadrons found themselves cut off from coordination, their weapons systems neutralized by adaptive AI that anticipated and countered every move. Panic began to seep into their ranks. Commanders, who had never doubted their supremacy, now debated with urgency and fear. And yet, Admiral Selkirk did not celebrate. He knew this was the opening chapter, the initial shockwave. The human fleet had achieved tactical superiority, yes, but the true test would come in sustaining pressure, exploiting weaknesses, and transforming victory in isolated engagements into strategic domination. Every maneuver, every strike, and every decision was part of a broader symphony, a symphony designed to teach the galaxy that humans were not merely survivors of a backwater planet, but innovators, strategists, and warriors capable of redefining the rules of engagement. The first hours of the battle set a precedent that the aliens would never forget. Every laugh they had shared upon observing the human fleet evaporated in the vacuum of space. Every assumption about humanity's weakness, predictability, and expendability was shattered. The humans, seemingly fragile and insignificant, had proven that intelligence, creativity, and courage could outweigh size, firepower, and centuries of arrogance. As the dust of the initial engagement settled, reports streamed in across the fleet. Enemy vessels crippled, formations disintegrated, command networks disrupted. Admiral Selkirk's calm voice resonated across comms, not as a call to panic, but as a statement of fact. Humanity had not merely defended its home system, it had demonstrated, with ruthless efficiency and undeniable ingenuity, that the galaxy had made a critical miscalculation. And somewhere in the depths of the void, the alien commanders realized that their laughter had been premature. They had assumed humanity's weakness, and in doing so, had invited a reckoning the likes of which no star system had seen in millennia. The war for Earth had begun, not as a battle of numbers, but as a clash of wills, of ingenuity, and of a species unwilling to be underestimated. By the time the first day of combat ended, it was already clear humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to redefine what it meant to be a galactic power. The aliens had chosen poorly, and the consequences would echo across the stars. As the second day of the conflict dawned across the Sol system, the scale of humanity's audacity became undeniable. The alien coalition's vanguard, once confident and disciplined, was fragmented, disoriented, and increasingly desperate. Reports poured into Admiral Selkirk's flagship, the Dauntless Resolve, from across the fleet. Entire squadrons immobilized by human electronic warfare, command arrays crippled by cloaked strike teams, and logistical hubs annihilated with precision that seemed almost preternatural. Every victory was not just tactical, it was psychological. Humanity's enemies were beginning to understand a concept they had never considered. Humans did not conform to expectation. Admiral Selkirk moved through the command deck with calm efficiency, monitoring the chaos and orchestrating responses with the measured decisiveness of a master strategist. Each decision was informed by real-time data streams, but also by intuition honed through decades of experience. Human ships, smaller and seemingly weaker, were operating with an efficiency that defied conventional analysis. Every frigate, every corvette, every converted freighter was both a weapon and a lesson in improvisation. They struck at critical nodes, lured enemy vessels into traps, and vanished before retaliation could be coordinated. The coalition's errors multiplied. Their attempts to adjust formations in response to human tactics only made them more vulnerable. Larger vessels, reliant on predictable patterns and central command hierarchies, were now exposed to precision strikes from multiple angles. Cloaked human corvettes slipped between sensor blind spots, sabotaging shield generators and disabling propulsion systems. Drones meant to intercept them were hijacked or destroyed before they could act. Even alien captains, whose civilizations prided themselves on superior intelligence and analytical foresight, were unable to predict the humans' next move. On Earth, the war effort had become all-encompassing. Entire populations were mobilized in ways that transcended conventional warfare. Engineers, physicists, coders, and even civilians contributed to the fleet's efficiency and effectiveness. Algorithms were written and rewritten in real time, predicting enemy movements and adapting strategies before the coalition could react. Supply chains were optimized mid-flight, ensuring that every vessel remained operational even as battles raged across the system. The planet itself had become a weapon, a bastion of ingenuity, and a hub of coordination unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Individual acts of human brilliance turned the tide in unexpected ways. A squadron of scout frigates, trapped behind enemy lines, executed a daring maneuver through a dense asteroid cluster. Using gravitational anomalies as cover, they evaded detection and emerged to disable the main weapons array of a massive alien destroyer. In another sector, engineers aboard a heavily damaged cruiser rewired its energy core mid-battle, transforming it into a high-output pulse cannon capable of disabling multiple enemy vessels in a single strike. These were not isolated victories. They were emblematic of a species whose survival instinct was inseparable from creativity, adaptability, and unyielding determination. Even the coalition's attempts at psychological warfare failed. They broadcast messages warning humans of imminent annihilation, attempting to sow fear and confusion. But humans responded, not with panic, but with coordinated defiance. The messages were intercepted, decoded, and analyzed. Engineers reverse-engineered communication jammers, turning the coalition's own transmissions into decoys that misled enemy sensors and lured entire fleets into ambushes. Fear was not a weapon against humanity. It was a resource, refined into courage and resolve. As the battle progressed, the scale of the coalition's miscalculation became staggering. They had assumed humans were predictable, weak, and subordinate. Instead, humans were proving to be adaptive, relentless, and capable of operating in ways that defied every known principle of warfare. Entire sectors of the alien fleet were neutralized through tactics that could only be described as audacious improvisation. What the coalition had anticipated as a minor skirmish now threatened to escalate into a catastrophic defeat. The galaxy itself seemed to take notice. Neighboring civilizations, previously indifferent to Earth, monitored the conflict with a mixture of astonishment and fear. Humans, once considered a primitive species with limited influence, were now demonstrating capabilities that rivaled or surpassed those of the coalition's more advanced members. Strategic doctrine, once thought immutable, had been rendered obsolete by human ingenuity. Even the most sophisticated war algorithms could not anticipate the creativity, risk-taking, and resilience of the Terran fleet. In the command center of the dauntless resolve, Admiral Selkirk issued orders that reflected both tactical brilliance and strategic foresight. Strike teams were deployed in waves, not just to inflict damage, but to force the enemy to continually react, to stretch their formations, and to expose vulnerabilities. Decoys and feints were used to confuse sensors, lure capital ships into kill zones, and create cascading failures across entire fleet divisions. Every decision, every maneuver was designed not just to survive, but to dominate, to turn the coalition's assumptions against them, and to demonstrate the full scope of human capability. By the end of the second day, the impact was undeniable. The coalition's vanguard had suffered heavy losses. Their formations were fractured, and their command networks were compromised. The humans had achieved more than just survival. They had established tactical superiority, turning their smaller numbers into a decisive advantage. The alien commanders were forced to retreat, reassess, and confront an uncomfortable truth. Their understanding of humanity had been flawed. Their arrogance had blinded them to the species' capacity for ingenuity, courage, and adaptation. And yet, for Admiral Selkirk, this was merely the beginning. Tactical victories, no matter how impressive, were only one part of the equation. The larger goal was strategic dominance, to ensure that the coalition understood, beyond doubt, that humanity was not to be underestimated. Every engagement, every innovation, every daring maneuver was a step toward that ultimate objective. Humans were not merely defending their planet. They were rewriting the rules of interstellar conflict, and the galaxy would take notice. The day ended with reports of enemy vessels retreating toward the outer rim of the Sol system, damaged and disorganized. Across the Terran fleet, crews celebrated small victories quietly, knowing that the true test was still to come. The aliens had assumed humanity would be easy prey. They had calculated weakness where there was none. And in doing so, they had allowed a species of tenacity, creativity, and unyielding will to turn what should have been a minor skirmish into a lesson in the cost of hubris. Humanity had begun to turn the tide, and the message was clear to every observer across the stars. To underestimate humans was to court disaster. The battle for the Sol system had proven that while numbers and technology were important, adaptability, courage, and ingenuity could redefine the very outcome of a war. The aliens had learned their first lesson, but the humans were only getting started. By the third day of the conflict, the alien coalition's confidence had completely eroded. What had begun as a routine campaign of intimidation had devolved into a desperate struggle for survival. The humans of Earth, once perceived as insignificant, were now dictating the tempo of battle, exploiting every weakness and redefining the limits of strategic warfare. Admiral Selkirk, aboard the dauntless Resolve, understood that the time had come not just to defend, but to strike decisively, turning tactical brilliance into a strategic collapse of the enemy. Every human vessel had been modified for versatility. Frigates carried concealed strike pods capable of breaching massive hulls. Dreadnoughts wielded energy projectors recalibrated mid-battle to counter alien shield frequencies. Cloaked drones infiltrated communications networks, sowing confusion across entire squadrons. Humans leveraged every resource at their disposal, combining ingenuity, improvisation, and relentless aggression to exploit the coalition's rigid hierarchies and reliance on brute force. The first major operation of the day, known to the humans as Operation Sundering, involved a multi-pronged assault that leveraged misdirection, deception, and adaptability. Scout frigates drew the coalition's attention to one sector, feigning weakness and retreat, while hidden corvettes maneuvered behind enemy lines to disable critical support vessels. Orbital platforms, previously hidden by advanced cloaking fields and asteroid cover, unleashed devastating concentrated volleys, crippling alien dreadnoughts and leaving their escorts scattered and vulnerable. In the alien command network, panic began to replace the rigid discipline that had guided the coalition for centuries. Signals were lost, formations collapsed, and communications between fleets became sporadic. Alien commanders, who had prided themselves on centuries of tactical doctrine, found themselves unable to respond effectively to a species that did not follow predictable patterns. Every human maneuver, every improvised tactic, every adaptive strike tore apart their assumptions and forced them into reactive chaos. On Earth, the population had become an integral part of the war effort. Analysts fed real-time data to commanders aboard the fleet. Engineers monitored and repaired systems remotely, sometimes making split-second modifications that turned damaged ships into lethal weapons mid-combat. Civilians contributed not just through manufacturing and logistics, but through tactical simulations, AI programming, and even battlefield coordination. Every citizen was a participant in the defense, embodying a uniquely human combination of ingenuity, perseverance, and determination. Admiral Selkirk's strategy relied on continuous adaptation. Rather than holding a single line or waiting for the enemy to act, he forced the coalition to respond to the humans' initiative. Each engagement created new opportunities for deception and exploitation. Phantom fleets, projected through sensor jamming, confused enemy targeting systems, while small, nimble craft delivered surgical strikes against command nodes, logistics hubs, and propulsion systems. Entire alien squadrons found themselves isolated, vulnerable, and overwhelmed by a species they had assumed could not fight back. Individual heroism emerged everywhere. Lieutenant Commander Mara Leon, commanding a squadron of corvettes, executed a daring infiltration maneuver into the heart of an enemy formation, disabling a major dreadnought's shield generators with precision strikes that left the vessel defenseless. Engineer teams aboard the human dreadnought Iron Vanguard rigged an experimental pulse cannon to destroy multiple capital ships at once, a risky improvisation that paid off spectacularly. Civilians operating orbital sensor networks identified previously unknown weaknesses in alien propulsion systems, allowing human strike groups to exploit vulnerabilities that no one thought existed. Meanwhile, the Coalition's attempts to coordinate a counterattack were ineffective. Larger ships, dependent on predictable formations and centralized command, were continuously drawn into traps, ambushed, and neutralized. Their advanced AI systems struggled to adapt to human unpredictability, and the loss of critical vessels further degraded their command networks. Even the most experienced alien captains began to doubt their ability to control the battle, their morale eroding under the relentless pressure of a smaller, yet vastly more adaptive opponent. Admiral Selkirk understood that the key to victory was not annihilation alone, but the demonstration of human ingenuity and resilience. Every engagement was designed to teach the Coalition that humans could not be dismissed. Every maneuver, every adaptive strike, every calculated risk reinforced a single undeniable truth. Humans were not merely survivors, they were innovators, warriors, and strategists capable of turning the galaxy's most powerful fleets into a lesson in humility. As the day wore on, Operation Sundering achieved its full effect. Entire alien squadrons were destroyed or immobilized. Command nodes were captured or neutralized. Supply lines were severed, forcing the Coalition to retreat or face complete destruction. The humans had achieved a level of operational superiority that had seemed impossible only days before. The alien Coalition's vanguard, once arrogant and overconfident, was now fractured, retreating in disarray and unable to mount a cohesive defense. In the orbital command center of the dauntless Resolve, Admiral Selkirk addressed the fleet, his voice calm but resonant with authority. "This is not just a victory of weapons or numbers," he said. "This is a victory of adaptability, intelligence, and courage. The galaxy has underestimated us for too long. Let them see what it means to choose poorly." Across the fleet, humans responded with quiet determination rather than celebration. They knew the battle was far from over, and that strategic mastery required sustained effort. Yet the psychological impact of their success was undeniable. Across the stars, sensors and communications networks carried reports of humanity's achievements, spreading a wave of awe and apprehension among both allies and enemies. The alien Coalition, meanwhile, was forced to confront the harsh reality of their misjudgment. They had assumed superiority, disregarded human ingenuity, and dismissed a species they believed insignificant. Now, faced with a relentless, adaptive opponent, they realized that their initial assumptions had been fatally flawed. The humans of Earth had proven that intelligence, courage, and innovation could overcome overwhelming odds. By the end of the third day, humanity had not merely survived, they had demonstrated the full scope of their capabilities. The alien Coalition's morale was shattered, their formations were fragmented. Their strategies had failed, and the humans, guided by Admiral Selkirk's leadership and sustained by the ingenuity and courage of every citizen, had turned the tide of a war the galaxy believed would be one-sided. The stage was now set for the final, decisive confrontation. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they would not bow, they would not submit, and they would not be underestimated. The aliens had learned too late that Earth was not a planet to conquer lightly. The humans had chosen not only to defend their home, but to assert their rightful place in the cosmos. And somewhere in the void, beyond the shattered ranks of the coalition, a chilling realization spread among the enemy commanders. They had declared war on a species that would not simply fight back, they would rewrite the very rules of war, and every choice they had made against humanity had been a mistake of catastrophic proportions. The fourth day of the conflict began under a vacuum of silence that spoke louder than any alarm or siren. Across the Sol system, alien fleets were scattered remnants of their former might. Command structures had collapsed, supply lines were severed, and morale had crumbled under the relentless, unpredictable onslaught of humanity. Yet, for the humans of Earth, the battle was far from over. Victory required not just brute force, but the careful orchestration of strategy, psychology, and precision, a symphony of war that only humanity could conduct. Admiral Selkirk's dauntless resolve hovered at the center of a meticulously coordinated human fleet, a nerve center from which every movement was calculated, every strike orchestrated. The aliens had underestimated one fundamental truth. Humans were not bound by doctrine, tradition, or fear of failure. Where alien captains followed centuries of rigid hierarchy, human commanders innovated on the fly, combining experience, intuition, and raw courage in ways that confounded the coalition at every turn. The opening of the final phase of battle involved a daring infiltration of the coalition's Central Command cluster, a heavily fortified system that had been considered untouchable. Cloaked human corvettes slipped through sensor dead zones, threading the needle of asteroid belts, magnetic storms, and defensive turrets. Each vessel carried specialized strike teams and adaptive AI capable of hacking, sabotage, and electronic warfare. The mission was simple in statement, yet monumental in execution: disrupt command, fragment coordination, and induce maximum chaos. Inside the cluster, the aliens had constructed what they believed to be an impregnable defensive network. Dozens of capital ships surrounded the core, their shields synchronized to create overlapping barriers of energy, while thousands of drones patrolled the perimeters. Sensors constantly scanned for anomalies, and every approach was analyzed through predictive algorithms designed to anticipate human ingenuity. Yet, despite their technological marvels, they failed to account for one variable. Lieutenant Commander Mara Leon, commanding the lead corvette Intrepid Shadow, navigated through the chaos with a combination of intuition, instinct, and rapid-fire decision-making. The ship's AI processed millions of possible trajectories per second, but it deferred to human judgment in moments of high uncertainty. The coalition's defenses were breached, not through overwhelming firepower, but through creativity and calculated risk. Drones were corralled into traps, shield generators temporarily disabled, and a critical communications hub exploited to generate a cascade of false signals that sent the alien fleet into disarray. Simultaneously, the human dreadnought Iron Vanguard unleashed a synchronized salvo of adaptive plasma and kinetic projectiles, striking at the alien vessels that had been pulled into position by the decoy corvettes. The result was catastrophic. Capital ships were disabled in waves, escort formations fragmented, and critical systems exploded in a chain reaction that no algorithm could have predicted. In a single coordinated assault, the humans had shattered what had seemed impenetrable, turning the coalition's defensive confidence into desperate panic. On Earth, citizens monitored the progress with a mixture of awe and meticulous calculation. Engineers continued to adjust energy flows, redistribute power to damaged ships, and optimize the fleet's overall performance in real time. Scientists analyzed alien communications, predicting countermeasures before the enemy could implement them. Even civilians, working remotely through secure networks, contributed insights and calculations that informed tactical decisions. Humanity was not merely fighting, it was innovating at a scale that the galaxy had never seen. The alien coalition, faced with simultaneous disruptions in multiple sectors, attempted a desperate counterstrike. Capital ships fired massive salvos at human formations, hoping sheer destructive power could overwhelm adaptability. Yet each salvo was anticipated, each vector calculated, and each attack countered. Human ships moved like fluid, weaving through the storm of enemy fire while exploiting every weak point. Cloaked corvettes disabled weapon systems mid-salvo. Drones intercepted missiles with surgical precision, and adaptive shields absorbed and redirected energy to reinforce vulnerable points. The aliens' last-ditch efforts were systematically neutralized. In the midst of the chaos, Admiral Selkirk issued a command that would mark the defining moment of the war, a full-scale, coordinated pincer maneuver designed to encircle the remaining alien command vessels. Human fleets converged from multiple vectors, cutting off escape routes, severing communications, and isolating the core. Smaller ships darted between the larger capital ships, striking at engines, weapons arrays, and shield generators, while dreadnoughts delivered concentrated plasma and kinetic strikes that shattered remaining resistance. The coalition's commanders, once arrogant and dismissive, were now desperate and terrified. Attempts at negotiation, surrender, or retreat were blocked by the tactical reality imposed by the humans. Escape routes were sealed, supply lines annihilated, and the fleet's structural integrity was compromised beyond repair. For every maneuver the aliens attempted, humanity had a counter, an innovation or a preemptive strike that rendered the move ineffective. The galaxy had never seen a species capable of turning the art of war into such a comprehensive demonstration of ingenuity and resilience. Then came the final moment. The human fleet's adaptive AI integrated seamlessly with human decision-making, executed a sequence that disabled the coalition's last operational command vessels. The communications hub collapsed, scattering signals into chaos, leaving the remaining alien ships directionless and vulnerable. The humans did not celebrate. They pressed their advantage with relentless efficiency. Every surviving vessel was neutralized, commandeered, or forced into permanent retreat. By the end of the fourth day, the alien coalition had suffered catastrophic losses. Entire squadrons, fleets, and command centers lay in ruins across the Sol system. Admiral Selkirk addressed the fleet one final time in a broadcast that would echo across the galaxy. This battle is won, not because of our numbers, not because of our technology, but because of our will, our creativity, and our refusal to be underestimated. Humanity has proven that to fight with intelligence, courage, and ingenuity is to become unstoppable. Let this be a lesson to any who would challenge us. We adapt, we endure, and we prevail. Humanity's victory was complete, but its significance transcended the immediate battlefield. Across the galaxy, civilizations took note. Species that had once dismissed Earth now reconsidered the assumptions that had governed interstellar diplomacy and conflict for centuries. Humanity had not merely defended its home, they had demonstrated that intelligence, adaptability, and courage could redefine the balance of power on a galactic scale. In the aftermath, Earth became both a symbol and a warning. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, returned to orbit to resupply and repair, while surviving aliens fled or surrendered. Humanity had endured the challenge of annihilation and emerged not merely victorious, but elevated. Tales of ingenuity, courage, and improvisation spread like wildfire, cementing the reputation of humanity as a species whose potential could not be measured by conventional metrics. And as Admiral Selkirk surveyed the remnants of the battlefield from the bridge of the dauntless resolve, he reflected on what had been achieved. Not just a defense, not just a victory, but a statement, a declaration that humans, when cornered, could rise above expectation, outthink the strongest fleets in the galaxy, and alter the course of history itself. They had not just survived. They had ensured that no enemy, no matter how powerful or arrogant, would ever underestimate humanity again. The stars, once indifferent to Earth, now watched with caution. The humans of Sol had spoken, not with diplomacy, but with action. They would defend their own, innovate beyond expectation, and, when necessary, strike back with a force that no adversary could fully anticipate. The galaxy would never forget the day the aliens chose poorly.